The moment the maître d' looked at me, really looked at me, up and down, the way you size up something that doesn't belong, I knew what was coming before he even opened his mouth. "I'm sorry, sir. This event is private. Are you on the guest list?" I told him my name. I told him whose graduation dinner it was. I told him I'd written the check. He smiled the way people smile when they've already decided. "Let me check with the host." I stood there in the lobby of Harrington's, the kind of restaurant that keeps the menu prices in a font small enough that you have to squint, and I looked down at my hands. 63 years of living right there in the knuckles. Calluses along the base of my fingers that no amount of washing ever quite gets rid of. I'd scrubbed them twice before leaving the house. I put on my good jacket, the charcoal gray one I bought for my wife's funeral 4 years ago and hadn't worn since. I thought I looked fine. I thought I looked like a man who belonged at his own son's dinner table. I should back up. My name is not important for this story. What's important is what I built, and what it cost me, and what my son decided to do with all of it. I grew up in rural Ohio, the son of a man who fixed things for a living. Engines, rooftops, whatever people needed. He wasn't rich. He wasn't supposed to be rich. He was the kind of man who showed up when you called and charged fair and slept well at night because of it. I watched him my whole childhood and I thought, that's a good life. A real one. So I followed him into it. I started my own contracting business when I was 26, just me and the borrowed truck and a willingness to work hours that other people wouldn't. By the time I was 40, I had 11 employees. By the time I was 50, I had 22. I wasn't a millionaire, but I'd built something from nothing, and I paid for my son's entire college education without taking a dime in loans, and I'd kept a roof over my family through a recession that broke a lot of people I knew. My son's name is Adrian. He's 38 now. He got his MBA, moved to Boston, married a woman named Courtney who works in finance, and somewhere along the way he started being embarrassed by me. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because I eventually understood it clearly, the way you come to understand something you've been pretending not to see for years. The first time I visited him in Boston, he introduced me to his neighbors as my dad. He runs a small business in Ohio. The second time, at a work party of his, he said, my dad does contracting, and then steered me away from the conversation before anyone could ask follow-up questions. The third time, Christmas 2 years ago, I overheard him tell someone on the phone that his father was kind of a blue-collar type. I didn't say anything. My wife always said I held things too long instead of letting them out. And she was right. God rest her. So I held it. I told myself he was under pressure. I told myself it was the world he lived in now, that he needed to manage appearances, that it didn't mean anything deep. Then came the graduation dinner. My grandson, Adrian's son from a brief first marriage, a boy named Marcus who'd been living with his mother in Cincinnati, graduated from Ohio State in May. He was the first person in our immediate family to get a 4-year engineering degree, and I was so proud of that kid I could barely speak when he called to tell me. I'd been at every one of his baseball games I could manage, every holiday he spent with us, every awkward family gathering where the two sides of his family tried not to look at each other too long. Marcus and I had always been easy with each other in the way that sometimes happens between grandparents and grandchildren. We just understood each other without needing to explain too much. Adrian organized the celebration dinner. He called me about it in March and said he was reserving a private room at Harrington's in Columbus, that it would be family and some of Marcus's friends and a few colleagues who had mentored Marcus through an internship program Adrian had connections with. He said it would be formal. He said he was handling everything. I asked if I could help with the cost. He said no, he had it covered. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Marcus. Not Adrian, Marcus. He said, Grandpa, Dad told me you offered to help with the dinner. I just wanted to say I'd really love it if you came. And there was something in the way he said it, a careful hesitation I recognized, that told me the invitation hadn't been a given. I didn't ask. I just said I wouldn't miss it for anything. I drove to Columbus the morning of the dinner. 4 hours. I stopped at a rest area outside Dayton and changed into my good jacket in the bathroom because I hadn't wanted to wrinkle it in the car. I arrived at Harrington's at 6:15, 15 minutes before the reservation, because my father always said if you're not early, you're late. That's when the maître thought stopped me. He came back from wherever he'd gone to check, and his smile was a little more fixed than before, and he said, "Sir, I'm sorry. The host has confirmed the guest list is complete. I'm not seeing your name." "My name is," I started. "I understand," he said, "but I'm not able to see guests who aren't confirmed by the host. I'm sorry for any confusion." Any confusion? I stood there for a moment. The lobby had a chandelier overhead, the kind with about 400 small glass pieces that probably cost more than my first truck. A young couple came through the door behind me and the maitre d' greeted them immediately, warmly, without a pause. I stepped to the side. I took out my phone and called Adrian. It rang 4 times. He picked up with a sound behind him like a room full of conversation and silverware. "Hey, Dad." "Adrian, I'm in the lobby. They say I'm not on the list." A pause. Not a long one, but the kind of pause that has information in it. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, I meant to call you. The room is pretty full, and with Marcus's mentors here, I thought it's a little more professional than family, if that makes sense. I figured you'd understand. I want to tell you I said something sharp. I want to tell you I had the perfect response ready. I didn't. What I said was, he's my grandson, Adrian. I know, Dad. I know, but this is important for Marcus's career. These are people who can open doors for him, and I didn't want the dynamic to get complicated." "What dynamic?" Another pause. "It's just, you know how it is. These are very specific kinds of people, and I want Marcus to make a good impression." I understood what he was saying. I understood it perfectly. He didn't want me to be seen. He didn't want his contractor father standing in a room full of professionals making small talk about their weekend homes and their children's private schools and their opinion of the Fed's interest rate decisions. He had decided that I was a complication, a variable that didn't fit the image he was trying to project for his son or for himself. I said, "Okay." Just that. I hung up. I walked back through the lobby and out the front door and sat in my truck for a long time. The thing about real hurt, is that it doesn't always feel the way you expect. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just very tired in a way that had nothing to do with the 4-hour drive. I was tired the way you get when you've been carrying something a long time and you finally set it down, not because you're done with it, but because you just can't anymore. I thought about the checks I'd written, not to guilt myself or anyone else. I'm telling you because it matters to the story. I had paid for Adrian's college, all 4 years. I had co-signed the loan on his first apartment when no bank would take him a loan at 24, with no credit history. When he started his first job and his car broke down and he was 2 months from his first real paycheck, I wired him $1,200 without him having to ask twice. When he and Courtney bought their house, they were short on the down payment by $8,000, and I gave them 6 of it and called it a birthday gift so they wouldn't feel they owed me. I don't say any of this to keep score. I say it because it was all given freely, and I never once thought about getting it back. That's what you do for your children. That's what my father did for me, in smaller amounts, with the same lack of conditions. But I thought about it sitting in that parking lot. I thought about what all of it had bought me. I started the truck. I drove to a diner 3 miles away called Ricky's, the kind of place with laminated menus and the same waitress who's worked there since the Clinton administration, and I ordered coffee and a piece of lemon pie and sat at the counter. The waitress's name tag said Bev. She was maybe 60, with the kind of efficient warmth that good diner waitresses perfect over decades. She refilled my coffee without asking and didn't try to make conversation, which was exactly right. I sat there for about an hour. I thought about my wife. She would have had something to say about this. Not something mean, not something that would have made it worse. She was never that way. She would have said something that found the real thing inside the complicated thing, which was a talent she had that I never fully learned from her. I thought about Marcus. And that's when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Grandpa? His voice was quieter than usual, a little tight. Where are you? I'm at a diner. Ricky's, I think. Few miles away. A pause. They told me you left. I didn't know until about 10 minutes ago. I thought you were just running late. Another pause. Dad said he called you. He did. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I could hear the restaurant noise behind him, muffled, like he'd stepped into a hallway. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know. I want you to know I didn't know. I believe you. Can you stay where you are? I'll come to you. I told him he didn't need to do that. It was his graduation dinner, his night. He said, Grandpa, I'll come to you. Give me 20 minutes. He showed up in 30, still in his dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up the way young men do when they want to look slightly less formal, and he slid into the booth across from me and didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at my coffee cup and the plate with the remnants of pie on it, and then he looked at me. I asked Dad to call you and invite you again, he said. He said it was complicated. It's all right. It's not, though. We sat there for a while. Bev brought him a coffee without asking, which I think she'd figured out the situation the way good diner waitresses do. Marcus told me about his engineering program, about the internship he'd completed, about the job offer he'd accepted in Pittsburgh starting in August. He was excited about it. The real kind of excited, not the performed kind. He asked me about a project I'd mentioned in November, a renovation job on an old mill building out near Zanesville, and I told him how it was going. The problems with the original load-bearing walls, the way the woodwork in the upper story had held up against 100 years better than anyone expected. He asked me about the wood. I told him about it, old-growth oak, probably cut in the 1890s, grain so tight you could barely get a nail through it without pre-drilling, the kind of material that doesn't exist in new construction anymore. He leaned forward a little the way he does when something genuinely interests him and asked about the techniques. And we talked about it for a while, just the two of us in that booth, while Bev kept the coffee coming. At some point he said, quietly, My dad worked for you one summer. Did you know he told me that when I was little? He drove me past a building you'd renovated in Cincinnati and said his dad built that. He was proud. I remember it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I think, Marcus said carefully, that maybe he forgot. Or maybe he got scared of something. I don't know what happens to people. I looked at my grandson across that diner table. 22 years old, starting his life, wearing his good shirt in a diner because he'd walked out of his own graduation dinner to sit with me. And I thought, this is it. This is the thing that actually matters. Not the restaurant. Not the chandelier. Not the list. I drove home that night instead of staying over like I'd planned. Not out of self-pity. I want to be clear about that. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed, in my own house, the one I'd built the back porch on myself and replaced the gutters on every 8 years and knew every sound of in the dark. The next morning, I did something I'd been putting off for a long time. I called my attorney, a man I've worked with for years on contracts and property matters, and I told him I wanted to update my estate documents. Nothing dramatic. I just wanted things to be clear and documented the way they should have been years ago. I made sure Marcus was named directly in several provisions, not just as a downstream beneficiary. I made sure the things I cared about would go to the people I trusted. I didn't call Adrian to tell him. I just did it. About a week later, Adrian called me. I could tell from the first sentence that Courtney had told him to call. There was a particular tone he gets when he's following instructions. He said he wanted to apologize for how the dinner had been handled, that it hadn't come out right, that he hoped I understood the pressures he was under. I let him talk. Then I said, I understand more than you think. He asked what that meant. I said it didn't need to mean anything specific. I said I loved him because he was my son, and that wouldn't change. I said Marcus had found me at the diner and we'd had a good talk and I was glad for that. He said, Good. That's good. I said, Adrian, I need you to hear something. He went quiet. I am not ashamed of what I am. I never will be. I don't need you to introduce me to your colleagues. I don't need a seat at any particular table. But I do need my grandson to know his grandfather. And I need you to understand that I am not a complication to be managed. A long silence. I know, Dad, he said, and his voice was different. I don't know what to call it. Something that had been tight went looser. I know. I don't have a clean ending for you. Life doesn't usually hand those out. Adrian and I are still finding our way back to something easier. It takes time. It takes both people deciding they want to get there. What I know is this. The morning after the dinner, I went out to the workshop behind my house, the one I built from the ground up, with help from 2 friends and about 4 weekends of work. 15 years ago, I ran my hand along the edge of my workbench. Solid maple, hand-planed, level as the day I finished it. There's sawdust in the grain that'll never fully get out. There's the ghost of 1,000 projects in the smell of that room. I am 63 years old. I have built things that will outlast me. I have a grandson who drove across Columbus in his dress shirt to sit with me in a diner, and I have that conversation about old-growth oak to carry with me for as long as I live. That's not nothing. That's not even close to nothing.